What are you doing about investing in your learning and your growth? You get in the driver's seat. No company, no HR team, no one is going to lay that groundwork for you. And career mapping or career, like, no, there's no straight line to any of it.
Hi, I'm Michelle Aronson, and welcome to True Stories at Work, where we discuss the best things about working in human resources, the people, the stories, and the things that happen at work that we didn't even know about. Workplace Confessions. I'm a recovering HR executive, certified coach, and business school professor who knows that the best stories happen at work, from heartbreaking to heartwarming, from hilarious to outrageous. Now, I get to collect great stories from amazing HR professionals and help companies create cultures that drive their business strategy. Today, you get to meet Keri-Lynne and learn how she fell into and in love with HR.
They said, "Hey, we think you should consider this job as performance management manager." And I really didn't know even what it meant, to be totally clear. And it was the best accident that ever happened to me.
KL began her career selling cars and used those skills to sell herself, even when it's the hardest to do after you've been rejected for a role.
I wrote back to him and I said, "Listen, I think you're leaving an opportunity on the table because if you hire me now, you can mold me and shape me, and I can learn along with you. And I know I'll make an impact in your organization." And a week later, I was on an airplane to New York and they hired me. They made me the offer before I got back on the plane.
KL shares a story about the greatest leadership challenge she faced and how that helped her become an even better people leader.
And it was a people agenda every single day. And it was one of the most challenging, yet one of the most rewarding times in my career. And I'm really proud of what we did during that time.
And of course, we have a workplace confession, something somebody did at work that didn't get caught. This one has to do with leveraging your workplace to save money. So let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Keri-Lynne. I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about you. Can you just take a minute and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your HR career?
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. I go by KL. My story and my journey to HR is a little bit different. I fell into it by complete accident. It was never on my trajectory. I didn't know how to spell it. It was never something I had dealt with. So in most of my career, I was in sales and marketing. And every job I ever got was somebody tapping me on the shoulder to say, "Hey, Kale, come join our team." And I didn't ever really have to deal with HR. I never really had to do any of the recruiting stuff. The only time I knew about HR was during the annual enrollment for benefits. And that was it. So when somebody tapped me on the shoulder inside, I was working for at the time, they said, "Hey, we think you should consider this job as performance management manager." And I really didn't know even what it meant, to be totally clear. And it was the best accident that ever happened to me. I learned so much during that time. And I've been so fortunate in my career that every leader's always given me a bit of a green field and a clean sheet of paper and allowed me to put my spin on everything. I would say we didn't really have a lot of job descriptions anyway, and it was just sort of throw you to the wolves and see how you do. And this was one where I really got to put my imprint on it. I then went from there to be an expat in Germany and run a global HR project, which I had no business doing. I had no idea what I was doing. Like most of my jobs, I did not have experience to be equipped to do any of them. And that was sort of the fun part about it. But HR turned out to be just such a brilliant space because many people are afraid of it. And I think a lot of leaders and organizations really underestimate the power in partnering with your HR business partner. And I definitely pride myself on the fact that I served as a true partner to the business. And I also believe We are one of the few people besides the CEO, and I would say we have even more than the CEO. We have the breadth and we have the depth of every single department in the organization, unlike any other department in the organization where they're pseudo siloed, right? So I think we have this sort of secret sauce magic ability to kind of peek behind the curtain, understand the organization, but also understand what really makes the organization tick, and that is people. And so I believe it's the best job in any company. And I went all the way. My last corporate role was chief people officer, but it's a really special place and it's been an incredible run. And in sales and marketing, that was really a platform to set me up for success as a chief people officer because I was customer obsessed. And so my customer just went from the external customer to the internal customer, and helping people unlock their potential is my jam and it is my purpose. And so I was right where I was supposed to be.
I love that you went all the way. Me too. You start out in HR and you just keep learning more. You never know what you're doing. If you do know what you're doing, I don't know, it's probably too comfortable. I was over human resources and then I took over customer experience. And that was incredible because both of those metrics are so critical and influence each other entirely.
Yeah, we have more in common than you realize because I also ran customer experience before I took over as head of HR, and that was probably my second favorite role. So fascinating, so interesting, and is really the driver of every decision that you make inside an organization. It's your people and your customer. The next
Yeah.
job for us, Michelle, is CEO, because that's also a trajectory. A lot of CHROs are now moving into that function, and I'm so happy and excited to see that.
We'll have to see. I'm the CEO right now.
Me too.
So look, we've made it. We've hit the ceiling finally. Tell me a little bit, where did you grow up and what was that like?
So I grew up in northern Western Canada, and it was a smallish town, 50,000 people outside of a city of a million. But I couldn't wait to get out of there for the one main reason, and that was -40 average winter day, which I suppose global warming has changed that a little bit. But I am a sun seeker. I belong to the beach. God dropped me in the wrong place when I think about location from a heat perspective. I'm a Pisces and I belong at the water. So yeah, I grew up there, loved every minute of it. Go back and visit, obviously, but I couldn't wait to move to a warm climate, so I moved to Arizona, and now we live in the Northeast, Greater New York area.
When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
No idea. Never ever crossed my mind. I discovered fairly early on that I was really good at sales. So I paid for college by selling cars. And I love the rush of the sale. I also sold a lot of luxury products. I worked for in Canada, it's called Holt Renfrew. It's like an Neiman Marcus in Canada. It's a big department store. And I loved the clients and I had so much fun with it. I would deliver something to someone's house in the middle of a snowstorm because they had an event and I just loved, saving the day and making people feel good. So yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and actually, I think that really worked well for me because I wasn't narrow to and really missing opportunities. That said, I did study special ed, so I had originally thought I was going to be a special ed teacher, and I was 7 classes shy of my degree, and I quit school. And I paid for my own school, so my parents really didn't have a say in, "Oh my god, you quit school, what are you thinking?" But I just recognized that this was not the path that I wanted to be on. So I ended up quitting and then went back and I went to business school and, got my MBA and went all the way from a school perspective as well.
Why did you pick business school if school was not your jam? What was it about? What did you want to get out of business school?
So I was offered a job, my first real corporate experience with I had been working for a marketing company and traveling around the country doing events. And I met this guy at an auto show. I was a product specialist, and he walked up to the booth during the press week, and he kept coming back every day and talking to me. And he said, "So, Keri-Lynne, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to get into corporate. I want to work for." And he goes, "Well, why don't you come work for me?" And I was like, "Who do you work for?" He goes, I didn't even honestly know what was. Really naive, 24 years old. I said, "Well, sure, I'll send you my resume." Sent him my resume. He wrote back and said, "Thank you so much. It was so nice meeting you, but I see here you don't have your degree, and we won't hire anyone who doesn't have their degree." And I was like, I was so bummed because I really wanted to break into corporate. And so I had to sit on that for a couple of days. But 2 weeks later, I reached back out to him. I had signed up for transferring all my credits to the US because at the time then I was living in the US and signed up to finish my degree. And I wanted to study marketing. And so I wrote back to him and I said, "Listen, I think you're leaving an opportunity on the table because if you hire me now, I am going to finish my degree. I've signed up and you can mold me and shape me and I can learn along with you. And I know I'll make an impact in your organization." And a week later, I was on an airplane to New York and they hired me. They made me the offer before I got back on the plane. So I really pried that door back open because I knew that was the direction that I wanted to go. And I knew that all the doors were going to close if I didn't finish my degree, and then paid for it and paid for my MBA. So it was a win win.
Great story in terms of just being hungry, right? And following up on an opportunity and finishing the work that you needed to do. When I think about sales, I also feel like HR is sales. I started out as a recruiter, so maybe that's why I feel really hurt if somebody doesn't take my offer. I took it very seriously, and yeah, it does feel a little bit like sales.
Don't you think, Michelle, though, that many jobs are sales? So you are a project manager, you're selling to get more budget. So there's an element of sales. You're selling yourself in some ways, right? Why should I get that promotion? Why should you pick me to be part of that project? And as an HR professional, you are representing the organization and you're pitching it to every single candidate that you meet.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to get into your stories. So tell me about maybe the biggest challenge that you had to deal with in human resources.
Wow. Challenges in human resources. I mean, there's so many to choose from. I would say the pandemic. Being a chief people officer during the pandemic was no joke. It catapulted that role for a lot of organizations and a lot of people who perhaps didn't have a seat at the table prior. And I do believe that was a beautiful place for HR. But given the fact that we were talking life or death situations and the amount of empathy that leaders needed to pivot to and to teach them to understand why it was so important that you led with empathy. I remember one of the leaders from Europe. I was in a global organization at the time, and one of the leaders from Europe said, "Oh, okay, so like, can we put software on people's computers, so we can see what they're doing?" I was flabbergasted. I mean, flabbergasted. So teaching these leaders that, first of all, when you were in the office, you did not have access to what these people were doing every day anyway. You were in meetings or you were traveling. So what makes this really that different? So really educating them and coming up with new ways of working together and motivating them and navigating the great challenge of not being as cash rich as we needed to be, and how are we going to make these really hard decisions. And it was a people agenda every single day, and it was one of the most challenging yet one of the most rewarding times in my career. And I'm really proud of what we did during that time. CEO and I were arm in arm, my VP of communications, arm in arm. The three of us navigated so beautifully in lockstep, writing the scripts for the town halls and just doing everything we could to be as human and accessible and leading from the front, more than I've ever seen in my career. And then add in George Floyd, add in the DEI challenge, which companies really went all in on. Sadly, a lot of companies have pulled back on, but that was a really hard experience to help leaders to truly understand what does that mean, because most of them only look at the D on paper and they don't understand the E, and they certainly don't understand the I and the B, which is how do you create inclusive environments where people actually feel like they belong and want to be part of your organization and want to bring their best selves to work and want to have a future here and want to be able to use their voice and know they can use their voice and not live in fear. It was a moving boulder uphill. And sadly, it fell on the chief people officer's role, shoulders. And it was really hard to convince leaders that they were actually the drivers of it. And yeah, that was a really hard time, but rewarding at the same time.
I think it's common that it's hard to remind leaders that they're the drivers of it. So, do you have any sort of nuggets or tricks or experiences from that time that helped to shift the balance from HR to the entire organization?
So I am arm in arm with them in helping them to actually learn how to have the conversations, learn how to do this on their own and not make it HR's problem, which I would say can be a bit of a fallback for them.
Mhm.
And just teach them the techniques and the mechanisms that you use to open the door to real conversations. And I think the pandemic helped that as well because suddenly there were babies sitting on your laps. You had to have a different level of empathy. Um, I think it was a great experience for leaders to learn how to lead differently. And I think many of them have forgotten it. I hope that it stuck with them, but seeing all of these reports of companies pulling everybody back in and the statistics by 2025 of companies that will be back in office is alarming to me that they didn't learn that the pandemic is really a truly experience to be able to lead differently.
Yeah, yeah, that is. I mean, it was an unplanned cultural shift, but human to human connection, it's hard through Zoom. I feel much closer when I'm in the same energy space.
My vote is if you're going to be in person, make it intentional. There are companies that are doing that very well. When we're together, we are intentional about being together, telling people to come into the office 3 days a week so they can sit on Zoom calls at their desk. And because there's no space for anyone or sitting in a phone booth where there's no oxygen is not an effective way to inspire people to come in. That's just ticking a box. So if you're going to do it thoughtfully, do it in a way where people actually do connect and aren't sitting there with their headphones because that's what I was seeing, right?
Yeah. But that's a culture thing, right? How you set up the office, what you expect, how people come into the space, what they're expected to do in the space.
That's the culture work, though, that Michelle, unfortunately, so many companies get wrong. They don't focus on the culture when actually that's the foundation of everything else. It's the same in M&A. When you don't bring HR in to the table early, like from day one of the process, it's all then reactionary and knee jerk. So to get the A right, you need the M to be properly planned out, and that's not just payroll and benefits. That is full cultural integration. That is an absolute top to bottom, and the longer that HR has to work with your leaders on that, the better off you're going to be, and I've seen that go very wrong as well because to your point, culture seems like such an afterthought, you know? Not everywhere, but
Yeah, in a lot of places. And it really has to be tied to the strategy. When I sit down with clients, I want to see their strategy. I want to see their mission, their vision, values, how it's being laid out through all the employee and customer touch points. What is the value of respect? Does that mean I'm going to disagree with you because I respect you and I want you to know my point of view? Or does that mean you're the boss, so I'll sit quietly and let you say whatever you want, and that's respect? So all of those little things are not little things, and they need to be addressed before you even get to, "Let me have you come in and do a program on how to work in an open office environment." It's a lot of work has to, have already been laid out, and that's the fun work. That's actually
I
my
agree.
favorite thing to do. Tell me a story where you made a difference and felt like the work you were doing in HR really had a positive impact on the workplace.
I would say most powerful impact that I walked away with was I was running a global project based in Munich, and it was a grading project. So we're talking 125,000 employees, and they had never done any kind of leveling inside the organization. So around the world, it was very mismatched, and we had a lot of expats moving around the world. And I accepted this job totally naive. I had no idea what I was walking into. Everyone said, "Don't worry, you'll go there and everyone speaks English. You'll be fine." I had never run a project of that magnitude before. So fast forward, I came back home with a herniated disc, most stress I've ever been under. We created something really special. We sold it within 6 months, and then we needed to go and implement it around the world, and we needed to test it. So I went to Beijing, and at the time, China was really an emerging market. And when it comes to grading and leveling, one of the challenges is when you're in an emerging market, it's a bit pie in the sky. We don't know that they are going to get to those results. And so when you're establishing this, the country hasn't proven yet results, and grading is based on the size of the organization, the size of the country. And I had to fight so hard for China to get the right caliber and quality of leaders to actually be able to get the results that they were looking for. And I remember going there a couple of times, and I was like in depth studying with the CEO and really trying to understand the nuances of how from one day to the next the government could come in and shut down all of your financial services from one day to the next, like the impact and the ability that you had to have to pivot in that environment and to be so resilient and have so much grit and be super creative and such an incredible problem solver. We couldn't send lower level people over there. And so I had to convince Germany, which by the way was really hard, that China needed to have higher level grading. And I think I was only able to manage that because I was there, because I listened, because I led with a different level of empathy and understanding, and I really I put everything on the line for them. And fast forward, China is, one of the biggest markets now in the world, and I'm so grateful that I was able to impact them in that way because they would never have gotten the caliber of people that they needed to be successful. So, yeah, that was one story that I'm very proud of.
That's amazing because leveling stories can go either way. I mean, nobody's sometimes happy at the end if you're trying to make them all make sense. It can be unpleasant for some and pretty happy
Well,
for maybe some others.
what was really hard about that was everybody was already in their level. And so we had to draw lines. And so some VPs were no longer VPs. And what was interesting, and I think I was so naive about this was it touched every single person in the company from the CEO down. And everyone was on edge because this was like something that could change their life. And if it did change their life, what did we do to make sure that they were protected? And for anybody who fell out of their current role, how did you explain that? How did you do that with empathy? How did you do that in a way that didn't, harm them in a sense? And what was the grandfathering and such? So communicating this program was so huge because they would see me coming and they were like, "Oh gosh, here she comes. I hope we're, able to articulate ourselves in a great way." But I think I led in the beautiful way that I try to lead and make everybody feel really comfortable. So turned
Yeah.
out well.
And leading with empathy is wonderful and seeking to retain and just being open to dialogue that is unpleasant probably for both, right? One final question for you. Do you have a workplace pet peeve?
I'm not a big fan of people who don't own their stuff and take responsibility. I'm not a fan of people that pass the buck or shove things under the rug. I'm all about transparency, and the sooner that we address an issue, the sooner we can fix it. That requires an environment, of course, there where there's trust and people can come forward. But yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine when people blame others and don't look for solutions. I am such a solution seeker and I love solving complex problems. I'm not afraid to say, okay, we have a problem here and we need to address it. And I worked in environments though where that was not fostered, and that was very hard because people would be afraid to come forward. But yeah, own your stuff, and let's fix it right away. And you can learn so much from it. Everybody makes. I hate the word mistakes, but everybody makes mistakes, and we learn more from those things than we do when everything is going right. So yeah, that's a big pet peeve.
I agree. Anything left unsaid? Anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to share?
I would say that HR is truly one of the most exciting, most interesting. There is never a dull moment. There is never a day that's the same. I'm so grateful for every HR experience I've ever had because everything you do in your career and as you grow as a leader has to do with people. So to get in and kind of unpack that and understand it and foster it and make a really big impact, I would say I've made a much greater impact because of my time in HR.
Just a note here. I was really excited to learn more about Kale's podcast, Career Ballers. The name reminded me of the rap song, I Wanna Be a Baller, Shot Caller, if you know that song, which will be linked in the show notes in case you don't. But I have a really dry sense of humor, so it really didn't land. But KL's response and advice is spot on. So enjoy my missed opportunity.
What's your podcast about? I can't remember.
It's called Career Ballers, and it's about being a baller in your career, how to get in charge of your career, how do you have really effective one-on-ones, how do you navigate a promotion, how do you navigate a demotion, and, everything that goes along with being part of a team.
Career ballers. I love that. I want to be a baller.
You are a baller. You are a CEO, and you were a chief people officer, you were absolutely a baller, you wouldn't have gotten that far. And so it's
Mm.
a question of, we'll bring guests on that are ballers in their space to help other people become ballers and help people get in the driver's seat, because I think a lot of people wait for HR, for example, to design a career development program. Well, HR doesn't have one, and therefore I don't have one. No, you don't need a career development program for you to get in charge of your career. What are you doing
Mm.
about networking? What are you doing about how you show up? What are you doing about investing in your learning and your growth? You get in the driver's seat. No company, no HR team, no one is going to lay that groundwork for you. And career mapping or career, like, no, there's no straight line to any of it. I could have said I'm going to go here and here and here and here, and then I'll become a chief people officer. That did not work that way. The only thing I did, Michelle, was think about how I show up and say yes to every opportunity and keep hustling and doing great work and delivering. Those are the only things that I could control. And the rest of it wasn't up to me. And so I think there's something really important there that people need to start owning.
You would think that owning your own company means that you know what you want to do, but I'm here to say it took me a while to figure it out. When you can do anything you want,
Yeah.
so I did say yes to everything. But the truth is, there was lots of things that I was doing that weren't bringing me joy, that weren't using all my skills, that were trial and error, that were failures. And so it's kind of funny when you've done it in a corporate setting and then you're on your own trying to figure it out, it is two separate things. And I think for me, the real magic was trusting myself, trusting how the work made me feel, trusting if I want to work with that client or not. But those are really hard choices, and it required a lot more thought than I thought. How's that?
Yeah. Well, also, what brings you joy, what you're really good at, what you love,
Mm.
what you're not good at, what can you hire out, and to say no to the things that, could be bringing you a big paycheck, but are not bringing you joy.
Yeah.
It's really finding that balance, and I think as coaches, we have that advantage, right? We know what feels good and feels right. It's being brave enough to say yes or no. I guess that's the part that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just the evolution and the little bit of work that you have to keep growing. So thank you so much for your time, KL, and thanks for being a guest on the show and for sharing your great stories.
Loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
We've all done something bad at work, but here's your chance to confess. From small wrongs like borrowing office supplies to simplify your back to school shopping or snacking on a coworker's lunch, to the major workplace sins, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll type. Here is today's conscious clearing confession.
This is my workplace confession, and it takes place at my very first job. I was working as a production assistant at a national cable network, but it was still relatively new. And that's important because they didn't really have the best security in place, certainly on the weekends. There really was kind of no one watching the shop. You could just go in and wave hello to whoever was kind of there, which was probably nobody in terms of security. And so I was working as a production assistant, as I said, my first job out of college, but I really wanted to be on air and I really needed to make a tape of myself as on air talent. And of course, the best way to do that would be in the studio of this very well known cable network. And what I would do is I would make sure to get to know all the people that worked behind the scenes. I was very good at baking cookies and brownies and lots of treats to give them so that they were all my best friends and would teach me how to work a lot of the equipment. So I learned how to work the teleprompter, the basic lighting, basic audio, and so on. So that on the weekends, when there really wasn't much security, me and my friend would sneak in, and I say sneak, not really sneak because again, there wasn't really any security at the time. Now there's very heavy security there. And I should mention it was in a sort of nondescript office park in the suburbs, which it's also in a more prominent place right now. But it was sort of an under the radar location. But we would go in and we would run the teleprompter for each other and make videos of each other playing TV anchor. And that is how we put together our first professional audition reels, which eventually both of us did successfully get to be on air talent. So it worked out. And technically, I don't know that I broke any laws, but it's certainly not something that I was advertising during the week when I was doing my job. So that's my confession.
Thank you so much for that confession, full of valuable lessons. First lesson is Human 101. Feed them, and they'll love you. Also, ask for forgiveness, not permission. It's not like she was bringing a magnet into an MRI machine. No one was harmed, no harm, no foul. Now clear your conscience by submitting your workplace confession at cultureandstrategylab.com/podcast. Thanks for listening to the show. If you work in HR and have a story to share, please visit my website, cultureandstrategylab.com/podcast. Stories are what people remember and how we connect, so please share yours with me. Thanks. Haiku for KL. KL's a baller. Once you hustlin' for big dreams, you're the shot caller.